The plane everyone called a flying coffin racked up one of the most lopsided kill ratios of the entire war. Not in American hands. In the frozen skies over Finland, same aircraft, same wings, same engine. In one country, a punchline. In another, a legend. So which reputation is the truth? That single question breaks almost every World War II aircraft ranking ever made, because most of them get it backwards. The planes you were told to laugh at sometimes terrified the enemy. The planes you were told to worship sometimes killed their own pilots. Today, the whole list gets torn down and built back up, worst to best, with the receipts on the table. No myths, no hero worship. Just what these machines actually did when metal met sky and lives hung on every decision. Some of these entries will make you angry. Some will make you rethink everything you assumed. And the plane sitting at the very top? Its price tag still stuns people who see it. Because it beat out a weapon program most people would rank higher. The surprises start immediately, right at the bottom of the barrel. Start at the absolute floor, the Fairey battle. On paper, a light bomber. In the air, a slow-moving target with a crew strapped inside. May 10th, 1940. The Battle of France erupts. And these planes get flung at German positions like nobody expected them to return. Most didn't. Mission loss rates climbed past 50%, again and again. Half the aircraft sent out never came home. Picture that. You take off knowing there's a coin flip chance you're not landing. Underpowered, undergunned, and obsolete the moment it entered service. German fighters and anti-aircraft crews treated it like target practice. Then came May 12th. Flying Officer Donald Garland and Sergeant Thomas Gray volunteered for a daylight run against German-held bridges in Belgium. 6 battles went in low. All 6 were shot out of the sky. Both men received the Victoria Cross, posthumously. Their courage was total. The machine beneath them was a failure, and no amount of bravery could rewrite bad engineering. That's the brutal opening lesson of this list. A great crew can't save a doomed design. If ranking these machines by what they did, not by their reputation, sounds like your thing, subscribe. The planes higher up this list shatter every assumption you're carrying. Next, a plane that turned out to be more dangerous to its own pilots than to the enemy. The A-36 Invader. The cruel irony? It shared its bloodline with one of the top fighters ever built, the P-51 Mustang. Same family tree, same graceful rots, but somebody strafed dive brakes onto it and forced it into the ground attack role. What happened next? 274 accidents per 100,000 flying hours. The worst accident rate in the entire United States Army Air Forces. Consider that for a second. A close relative of the war's greatest escort fighter. And pilots kept falling out of the sky in it. Not shot down. Not ambushed. Undone by the aircraft itself. How does that even happen? You take a beautiful airframe. You bolt on hardware it was never designed to carry. And you shove it into a mission it hated. That's how. Great genes, wrong job, deadly results. The A-36 proves that excellence isn't in the family name. It's in matching the machine to the fight. Now for the plane that tried to eat its own pilots alive. The Messerschmitt Me 163 Komet, Germany's rocket-powered interceptor, faster than anything the Allies could put in the air. First flight, September 1st, 1941. On paper, a leap into the future. In reality, a nightmare with wings. The fuel was the killer. 2 chemicals, T-Stoff and C-Stoff, so corrosive they could dissolve skin and bone on contact. A leak wasn't a maintenance issue. It was an agonizing way to die. Test pilot Joseph Pose found that out. His engine failed, forcing an emergency landing, and a ruptured fuel line soaked him in T-Stoff. It dissolved his flight suit and his skin where he sat trapped in the cockpit. Now look at the record. 10 Komets lost in combat. Fewer than 20 Allied aircraft shot down in return. And more pilots died during takeoffs, landings, and structural failures than from the chemicals themselves. So who was this weapon really hunting? A rocket that kills more of its own crew. Then enemy planes isn't advanced. It's a death sentence with a top speed. Climb the list and the story flips from tragedy to respect. April 2026. Off the coast of Japan, a crane hauls something out of the deep that hadn't touched daylight in 81 years. A Kawanishi N1K2J, the Shiden-Kai. One of the late war interceptors that actually rattled Allied pilots. 8 decades on the seabed, and it surfaced preserved enough for researchers to study bolt by bolt. Why does that matter? Because Japan built plenty of aircraft that crumbled under pressure late in the war. This wasn't one of them. Fast, heavily armed, and lethal with a skilled pilot at the controls. The kind of fighter that reminded the Allies Japan still had teeth, even as the tide turned against it. It lay forgotten under the sea for over 8 decades, and it still had something to prove. That's the line between a forgotten footnote and a machine that earned its place in history. The Shiden-Kai sits comfortably in the middle of this ranking, respected and dangerous. But the single biggest shock on this entire list isn't Japanese at all. Remember the flying coffin from the very start of this video? Time to settle the argument for good. The Brewster F-2A Buffalo. First flight, December 1937. The U.S. Navy's first single-wing flat fighter, which sounded like a step forward. Then came the Pacific. At the Battle of Midway, American Buffaloes were torn apart by Japanese fighters. Pilots called it a flying death trap and meant every syllable. Case closed, right? Not even close. Ship that exact same plane to Finland. Hand it to Finnish pilots against Soviet aircraft, and the impossible happens. 26 kills for every single loss. 26-1. The identical airframe that got slaughtered over the Pacific became a feared legend in the frozen north. So which version is true? Both of them. That's the answer nobody likes. The machine was never the whole story. Tactics, training, and the enemy across from you decide the outcome as much as the metal does. Judge any aircraft by one disastrous battle and you'll rank it dead wrong. Reputation lies. The record tells the truth. If this is making you rethink what you thought you knew about these planes, tap like. It genuinely helps push this history to more people who'd love it. Now, for the planes that earned their place, the honest way, through sweat instead of hype. The Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. Not the fastest, not the highest climbing, but rouged, affordable, and everywhere the fight needed it to be. And want proof it still commands respect? April 2026. Restorers peeled out original 1940s technical manuals and used them to repair and test fire the wing-mounted 50 caliber machine guns on a surviving P-40. 8 decades later, those guns roared back to life exactly as designed. Think about what that says about the engineering. People today treat those old manuals like scripture, rebuilding weapons that fought a global war before their grandparents were born, and the hardware still works. The Warhawk never topped anybody's dream sheet, and it didn't have to. It showed up, soaked up damage, and kept flying, while flashier fighters sat grounded waiting on parts. Reliability wins campaigns. Glamour doesn't. That's precisely why this workhorse ranks above the fragile miracle machines from earlier in this list. Higher still sits an aircraft the Soviet Union built like their survival depended on it. Because it did. The Ilyushin Il-2 Sturmovik. 36,183 of them rolled out. That number stands out immediately. The most produced combat aircraft of the entire war. The most produced combat aircraft in all of aviation history. No asterisk needed. Nothing else even approaches it. So why crank out that many? Simple. It worked. Armored like a flying fortress at treetop height, it pounded German tanks and trops day after grinding day. And Soviet leadership rated it as necessary as food itself. Losses ran heavy. They just built more. At a certain point, quantity becomes its own kind of quality. You can own the sharpest fighter in the sky, but if you've got a handful of them, while your enemy fields thousands of Sturmoviks flattening your armor into scrap, who actually wins the war? The Il-2 answered that with raw, overwhelming numbers. Not elegant, not glamorous, just relentless, hour after hour, front after front. Now the two fighters everyone desperately wants to crown as number one. The Supermarine Spitfire, the North American P-51 Mustang. Ask 10 enthusiasts which one wins, and you'll start a heated argument. The honest answer? The one nobody wants to give? Neither is simply the best, and anyone who declares a flat winner is skipping the fine print. Best at what? Exactly? The Spitfire ruled low-altitude defense over Britain, nimble and vicious in a tight turning fight where quick reflexes decided everything. The Mustang owned high-altitude escort, flying deep into enemy territory, and all the way home on a single load of fuel, shielding bombers that no short-ledged fighter could ever reach. Two different jobs, two different champions. Call one the outright winner, and you've just confessed you don't understand the war they were built to fight. The finest fighter always depends on the mission in front of it. That isn't dodging the question. That's where every honest historian ends up. Two masterpieces, engineered for two separate problems, each solving its own better than anyone dared expect, which lands us at the top of this ranking, on a plane that nearly self-destructed before it ever fired a shot in anger. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress. First flight, September 21st, 1942. And a development program so troubled it almost buckled under its own ambition. Engines overheated and burst into flames mid-flight. The structure cracked under stress. Major General Curtis LeMay handed the job of turning this beast into a working weapon, grumbled that it carried as many bugs as the Smithsonian's insect collection. Then came March 1944, the Battle of Kansas. Not a clash with any enemy, a war against the calendar. Of 97 bombers that had rolled off the assembly lines, only 16 could physically get airborne. 16 out of 97. Workers stood outside in sub-zero temperatures, making 54 mandatory modifications to drag that grounded fleet into flying shape. Around the clock. Frozen fingers. Racing an impossible deadline. That is what it took just to make this bomber usable. And even after all that cold and sacrifice, it still hadn't finished demanding its price. So why does the most troubled bomber of the war sit at the very summit of this list? Because of what it cost and what it ultimately did. $3 billion. That's what the entire B-29 program devoured, from first sketch to final delivery. The single most expensive military project of the whole war. More than the atomic bomb it was designed to carry. The Manhattan Project ran $2 billion. The bomber built to deliver it ran a full $1 billion higher. Consider the sheer weight of that. The weapon history remembers as the priciest secret of the war was outspent by the plane that carried it into the sky. That is the machine that closes this ranking. Not the prettiest, not the safest. The most expensive, the most difficult, and the one that reshaped how the entire war came to an end. If any of this rewired the way you see these aircraft, like and subscribe. Every machine on this list hides far, more beneath the surface, and all of it is waiting to be dug up.